Hello and welcome back to Uncouth Churlishness and the second part of the Burgman rebuild. Right before I started filming, the fuel pump arrived along with an oil filter, starter solenoid, and a battery. Fun fact, the battery on this scooter is actually larger than the battery on a Harley Sportster. Now let's go ahead and get these parts installed so we can hopefully ride this scooter today. So last time we went ahead and we cleaned out the fuel tank. It's all ready to go. Washed everything down. This is our starter relay. It goes right here. I was wondering where all these wires go and what they do. Clip onto the battery and they clip on top of this. It plugs in. Hopefully this will get rid of that F1 light we had up there. But yeah, let's go ahead and get this all set in here. As I try to get the fuel pump orientated, as I try to get the fuel pump in the right position, I had to press down while screwing on the lid. The problem is there's a real thick gasket that goes around that kept wanting to get caught and tear. So we had to get it situated just right without tearing it or causing any issues. Hey! Thank you, sir. Would have been fucking fighting with that for a long time. Sweet. Good yabo, it's like you're a mechanic or something. After my neighbor was able to help me get that fuel pump settled, I moved on to the battery and the starter relay. The first thing I did was hook up the positive and negative leads to the battery, threw on the battery cover, and then put on the starter relay, which goes on top of that. I was missing this in the first video and it was causing me a headache figuring out what all these extra red wires were for and where they went. After getting the battery situated, I focused back on the fuel system. I tried to hook the fuel line back up to the new fuel pump, but I realized it was missing the plastic retaining ring. Luckily, the old fuel pump had it on there, so I just swapped them out, and it was good to go. I was then ready to put gas in the tank and prime the system, and boy, I was getting excited at the thought of being able to start this thing. If you look right in front of the two injectors, right below the ignition, you'll see the fuel line's not hooked up. I did this so I could use the fuel pump to push new fuel through the line and hopefully carry any old debris out with it. But the fuel pump wouldn't turn on. I thought it might be something simple like a safety switch on the side stand or a blown fuse, but the more I dug into it, the less it made sense. I just couldn't get the fuel pump or the starter to turn on. At this point I was stumped. I went through all the fuses and relays and I couldn't figure out what was going on. But then I remembered the F1 light. That F1 light stands for the fuel injection system. That was telling me that, hey man, your problem's somewhere in your fuel system, you need to check it. But I had already done that. I checked all my fuses, relays, everything was factory. Everything seemed to be fine. There's a $300 diagnostic tool that you can buy, but I don't have that kind of money to blow. But luckily I found a guy in Slovenia who had a YouTube video about how to diagnose these codes yourself. You can just hot wire the bike. It's as easy as taking a lead from one of the diagnostic ports and plugging it into the other, and the dash will tell you the code. You take that code and look in your owner's manual or call your local dealer and they can usually help you out. Unfortunately, none of the dealerships in my local area could help me out very much. Oh, sweet. Doesn't tell you where it could be coming from, huh?
No, it's not telling me where it's coming from.
Dang. Okay, well, I appreciate the help.
Yes, sir.
Just because somebody works at a dealership doesn't mean they know everything about your particular vehicle or vehicles in general. So I had to resort to something old. Something even older than YouTube. I had to go back to forums. And the sad thing about forums is that there's a lot of great data there, but sadly there's a lot of dead links there as well. But I got lucky. As I dug deep into the archives, I found this old printout of the owner's manual. And sure enough, there's my C13 code. As I dug around the front of the bike, I found the intake air pressure sensor was unplugged. It wasn't laying there like I made it look for the shot, but it was actually buried up under the radiator and I couldn't see it. With that plugged in, I was ready to try and start the bike once again. Yes, COO means there's no codes present. That's a clear system, but still, you can hear the clicking. That's me working the thumb safety switch. Still nothing. So I couldn't figure out the electrical issue. I decided to move on to something I could figure out, and that was the oil. This thing was overfilled and had some really dark, nasty oil, so I decided to do an oil change. With fresh oil in the system, I was determined to make this engine turn over, even if that meant causing a fire in the process. So I know the starter works and it sounds decent. Why would the fuel pump in the starter not work automatically? I don't get it. Everything else on the bike works fine. I even went as far as to manually override the side safety switch on this bike. That side switch is a kickstand, but as you can tell by the clicking, that relay is working just fine. So I started digging more into the wiring harness, and on the back of the ignition, I found where they hot wired in the old car alarm that we removed from the first episode. They cut out the middle power cord. This is the main power feed from the battery, spliced into it, and then just left it be. So this makes for two wires on this harness that are cut. The one hanging out in front of the airbox and the one behind the ignition here. So now I'm kind of at a standstill. I've got over $500 in parts in this thing, and I don't think it's worth $1,500. I don't really want to go over $1,000 into it. But I went ahead and ordered a $50 wiring harness. It's an OEM harness, and I can start clipping off the sections I need, splice them into this harness, and hopefully get it running. So that's where we're going to leave it today. We're waiting on a harness to come in. We'll come back next week and hopefully get this thing up and running. Thanks for watching. I appreciate it. Like and subscribe, and we'll see you in the third episode.